Yesterday, someone asked me a pretty simple and straightforward question that also has a pretty nuanced answer. When retail, get ready, let's go. We're going to cover that question, which is kind of a larger existential topic for Cardano, but we also like to always keep abreast of all the current events in Cardano. So we're going to cover a few of those items first. The EU has announced plans to go forward with a digital identity wallet for EU citizens that will work for both public and private sector services. However, this shouldn't be new news to anybody. Clear back in March, the EU was releasing little documents like this one, building a trusted and secure European digital identity brochure. And look at this. You can see interconnected little nodes, and there's even a candle chart. Apparently the hands are involved in some kind of charting, and they also have nodes and a city all over them. Very high tech, guys. When you see this, just know we're talking about some super high tech stuff. I'm only shocked they didn't have any Fibonacci retracements in the hands, any Elliott waves going on there, perhaps some Ichimoku clouds. I think if they would have included those, they really could have driven home the point that this is very, very high tech and somehow involves charts. So, not to be confused with hands that don't have candles or charts or cities or nodes on them. Go down here. One of the things I really like in their approach to digital identity is this right here. They hit the nail on the head for one of the biggest pain points solved by digital identity, I think. Once only principle, they're calling it. And I think the second you see that, you instantly know what they mean, because our modern society is full of us filling out forms. Back in the old days, it was paper forms. These days, we're constantly filling out digital forms, and it's always the same thing. It's always your name, your address, a mailing or physical address, credit card information or some kind of government identification, depending on what it is, and you fill it out over and over and over and over again. Here in the little chart, they show exactly how this is going to work. You are a German citizen living in Belgium, wanting to get the Belgian residence card, and you can imagine exactly how this works. Instead of having to fill something out in Germany and then filling something out in Belgium, they've got this principle of reciprocity relying on defined levels of assurance with mandatory cross-border recognition. What they're saying is that the Belgian authorities would have to honor the digital identity that was issued to you in Germany. Like, obviously, you can imagine just by reading some of the documentation that's come out from the EU that they're probably not planning on running this on a public blockchain. I think we can imagine that this is good. I mean, the EU is a large block of people on Earth, and the more people we used to using digital identity, the better. And people's immediate reaction to this, I'm sure, is going to be, is it Cardano? Right? Probably not going to be Cardano, guys. That would be fantastic. But I think we all know that most large, government entities, they don't want to give up the control for stuff like this. They're going to want to run this on their own system that's going to be a closed-end, non-public system. But the good news is this whole block of people will get used to using digital identity. So it'd be really easy for them to switch over and use something like Cardano, right? Maybe the European digital identity they're given, maybe it's great for within the EU. But if you were to say to me, hey, there is this blockchain that people around the globe are using, with various dApps, various things, and you can also have a digital identity on that blockchain. That feels a lot less oppressive than Google or Apple providing me with digital identity, right? If it's like I can't, I have a hard time picturing a world where any nation state says, hey, go get your Google digital identity so you can vote, right? I see them doing what the EU did, saying, "Hey, we're going to run our own we're going to run our own closed system, not on a blockchain. It's just going to run on, I don't even know how the EU is trying to do this, secure servers or something." They're not going to tell you to go out and use your Apple or your Google digital identity to vote. It's going to be something like this. And short of that, though, smaller nation states who can't commission a gigantic project to create digital identity like this, smaller nation states, I could see them jumping on board with a solution like Cardano's Atala Prism type identity solutions. So I don't think this is a bad thing at all. I think this is great. I don't think there was ever a chance this was going to be Cardano. If they turned around in Cardano and it was revealed that Cardano plays a role in this somehow, I would be shocked and super, super stoked. I think that's highly unlikely. I think this is going to be a closed-end system, but I think there's a chance that, nation states, governments around the world will see the advantages to EU citizens of using digital identity, and they're going to want something similar because it's a better way to do things. The perfect example is this: not having to repetitively fill out forms, whether they be digital or analog. And these nation states, they're not going to be able to commission their own digital identity solutions. They're going to need somebody like a Cardano to come in and provide an off-the-shelf system. So I think this is a great thing. I think this is a step in the right direction. I think digital identity is a good idea. I know people have sort of conspiracy theory-esque concerns around digital identity. I don't find those arguments to be too persuasive myself. Here's something that's been going on for a while, but I don't think we've ever really addressed it. So I think everybody's aware there is a civil conflict going on in Ethiopia, and that Ethiopia is a gigantic project for Cardano. So the US has currently issued sanctions. These are not the all-encompassing kind of sanctions we have on rogue nation states like North Korea or Iran, where no one in the U.S. can do business with Ethiopia. These sanctions just affect certain government personnel, certain named government personnel. They have like a list, and those people are banned from entering the U.S. This article in the New York Times, kind of indicates this is a way the U.S. puts pressure on nation states. So the banned individuals, they wouldn't be able to come to the U.S. Their kids wouldn't be able to come to college in the U.S. It's just one of the many ways the U.S. sort of engages in this game of international relations, one of the many tools they have in their pockets. But do not fear, this is not the crazy rogue state, North Korea style sanctions where nobody's allowed to do business with them. When crypto retail? This used to be a simple question. So when someone asked me this question back in the old days of crypto, when it was super obvious to all of us that Bitcoin was going to be adopted and was going to replace fiat currencies, this was a simple question. We would compare it to adoption rates of the internet and say, give it some time, Bitcoin's going to take over. That hasn't happened, right? Everybody I know uses Venmo in North America. Venmo is very popular, and Bitcoin's been around longer than Venmo, and it has not achieved the adoption for actual day-to-day transactions that Venmo has. I've had a lot of people ask me to pay them in Venmo. Very few people have ever asked me to pay them in crypto. I've had people in an actual business that I owned. I've had people pay me in Bitcoin going back to, I think it was like 2016-ish. I had people paying me in Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, but no longer. And there's a reason why Bitcoin didn't achieve that same level of adoption for retail and day-to-day transaction. There's more than one reason, really. So I think the trajectory for Cardano is going to be a little bit different. Ethereum, I think, has also encountered some of Bitcoin's problems, but I think there's going to be a slightly different path charted for Cardano. So with Bitcoin, we had a couple different problems. The first problem was, of course, its inability to scale, culminating in the small block, big block civil war that we've covered before on this channel led to the creation of Bitcoin Cash. Really, the Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin schism was the defining moment when it was decided that the chain we currently call Bitcoin was not going to be used for small day-to-day transactions. The people who were paying me in Bitcoin were no longer going to be paying me in Bitcoin. It just became too expensive and too cumbersome. Bitcoin also has another problem, and that's that the people who paid me in Bitcoin in 2016, it wasn't a good idea. They were doing it because they were enthusiasts of cryptocurrency just like I was. I mean, I think they would do it again. And I think if the roles were reversed, I would have happily paid somebody in Bitcoin for real world services too, even knowing what I know now. But from a purely financial measure of the situation, it wasn't a good idea because the amounts of Bitcoin they paid me in 2016 this was before the big 2017 run up. The amounts they paid me now are worth vastly more than the amounts that they thought they were paying me, right? They totally should have hung on to all of that Bitcoin and paid me in dollars. In fact, a few of the people who were paying me that Bitcoin probably wish they could have the Bitcoin back at this point. But it's because Bitcoin and cryptos with a hard cap are deflationary, right? Bitcoin famously 21 million, Cardano 45 billion. These are deflationary financial instruments. And it was maybe never going to be a good idea for Bitcoin to be used as actual day-to-day money. So the deflationary nature of cryptos kind of works against it being used in retail. And while that's not really why stable coins were invented, that's the excuse we used for the invention of stable coins, and they work for that. Nobody's gonna be sad, a year later because they gave you some Tether or USDC or eventually a Cardano stable coin for goods or services. Whereas the opposite has been true with deflationary cryptos. So that's part of the reason why Bitcoin was never adopted more heavily for retail and day-to-day kind of transactions. But then we have Ethereum, right? We do have stable coins in Ethereum. Why aren't retail transactions happening in Ethereum? So again, while using Bitcoin was more expensive if you draw out the timeline a couple years, right? The same is true on a micro timeline with Ethereum, right? Ethereum couldn't scale. So the expense in doing an Ethereum transaction made it not make sense. So what did Ethereum end up being used for? So Ethereum ended up being used for coin swaps, right? And this was kind of like why stablecoins were originally invented. We say it's so that merchants didn't have to deal with the price fluctuations of volatile cryptocurrencies. I mean, the real reason stablecoins were invented was so that exchanges could avoid US regulation of the US dollar, right? It's like Tether is equivalent to the US dollar theoretically, but it's not a US dollar. So this was the way exchanges could say they're not transacting in US dollars. Whether there's any legitimacy to that legal argument or not, that was a big part of the reason they were invented. But they actually do this thing where people are happy to part with stablecoins and merchants are happy to accept them, or hopefully they will be, because they're not going to fluctuate in value that much. They know they're tied to fiat currencies. So Ethereum was too expensive at the time of the transaction. Bitcoin was too expensive when you draw out the value of Bitcoin over any length of time, really. Cardano has an opportunity to fix all that. Cardano isn't going to be too expensive at the time of the transaction. And Cardano has stable coins. So it fixes the deflationary problem and it fixes the transaction cost problem. But you got to give people a reason not to just keep using Venmo, not to just keep using the Visa network with fiat. And I think Cardano has kind of found the roundabout way to make that happen, right? They're going to provide people with things like digital identity, and the native currency of on-chain identity is going to be an on-chain currency, right? Probably that'll end up being some kind of stable coin that, rides on whatever chain, wins or has a big chunk of that digital on-chain identity race. So, in Ethiopia, if the Cardano plan works, it's going to be some kind of Cardano stablecoin that people are going to be happy to accept and spend. In the developed world, it might not work that way. We've already seen with the EU, we might have the government being able to commission its own digital identity solutions. You wouldn't have a blockchain project like Cardano coming in and providing it for the government. So you're going to have this division of digital identity and, a full-on public blockchain. But that's where the other use cases of crypto come in. We may end up with the citizens of Europe and North America and the most developed countries in Asia using central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, a euro coin, a Fed coin, a digital yen. They may be using those as their day-to-day currencies along with their digital IDs. But pretty quickly, I think the world is going to discover that central banks are going to manipulate those central bank digital currencies just like they do their regular fiat currencies. So crypto will still be providing this refuge of deflation in a world that is only suffering from more and more hyperinflation. So I think we've got the adoption use case already set out for the developed world. It's as a refuge from this hyperinflation. That'll be the big advantage of public blockchain over CBDCs, probably along with greater functionality. And then I think we're going to see this continued rollout of solutions for things like digital identity, and along with those will come adoption of cryptocurrencies. So I think when retail is something that may end up happening quicker in the developed world, because digital identity in some cases is going to come holding hands with digital currencies that are based on public blockchains. And then it'll continue coming in the developed world as a refuge from hyperinflation. And what I'm really looking forward to is as smart contracts and dApps get built out, I think we're going to have greater and greater functionality that the CBDCs just won't have. Probably CBDCs will be incorporated into a lot of dApps because people will want them. But I think the dApps are going to be native to blockchains like Cardano. So I think when retail, the answer to that might be different. In the paths are definitely different, and the timing might be different in the developed world and the developing world. But I think we're going to get there. Talk to you tomorrow.